No air e Māori, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Swiswiki. Coming up,
It's the sad part of not accepting and recognizing that identity.
Fiji commemorates Girmit Day. Also, a researcher warns of escalating conflict in West Papua. And
I feel like I was getting judged for the color of my skin and not understanding who I was.
cultural critics call out a kava business. The 146th anniversary of Girmit Day is being marked throughout Fiji and New Zealand this week. Fiji's Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka says the day is a profound moment in Fiji's history. On May 14, 1879, more than 60,000 people from India were brought to Fiji as part of Britain's labour system to work under harsh and often inhumane conditions on Fiji's sugar plantations. I spoke with Nick Naidu, the co-founder of Auckland's Fiji Centre, and began by asking him what are his plans for Girmit Day.
Yeah, so a number of things. We've also got Rotuman Language Week going on, but we were going to initially celebrate the Girmit celebrations in the Rotuman Language Week because there's a synergy with some of the Rotuman families who also have Fijian Indian descent, like my family. But tomorrow, we'll be just discussing it with our kids, with our children, and also mentioning it to the families that we connect with the community center. And then on Saturday, I think there's a bigger celebration in the community in Tamaki, in Auckland. And I think in Fiji, the commemorations continue as well.
Mm. Obviously, the legacy of Girmit is an integral part of Fiji's history, right? But from your perspective, why should it be recognised within the wider Pacific community?
Well, it occurred in the Pacific, and I think Fiji was the only country in the Pacific where the indentured system was implemented by the British. And it's also a sad legacy and a sad story because it was basically slavery. Mm-hmm. And the positive was that Fijian Indian community made a lasting impact on Fiji. They continue to be around 30% of the population in Fiji, and I think significantly in Aotearoa through the migration, the numbers are, according to the community, over 100,000 in New Zealand. So, and they've all contributed, to not only to the economy but to the diversity of the region. And Fijian Indians now work and live in most of the countries in the Pacific, including in Rarotonga. Cook Islands, there's a huge community in Rarotonga in the hotel industry, and also in Papua New Guinea, there's a significant Fijian community there, Fiji Indian community, mainly doing business, plus, of course, in Australia and New Zealand.
I'm going to circle back to you about the contributions that Fiji Indians have made to the Pacific, but there was a report that came out yesterday that the Vice-Chancellor of Fiji University is calling on Australia and British governments to consider paying reparations for exploitation and displacement of Indo-Fijians. Is that something you want to see happen too?
That's been an ongoing discussion for many decades. It is a very challenging one, because where do you draw the line? And it's a global problem, the indenture system. It's not just unique to Fiji. I think, personally, yes, I think that's a great idea. Practically, I'm not sure if it's feasible and possible. There's a bigger challenge around colonization. Tonight, we're having a discussion on decolonization at our community center, and some of that discussion will be around the Fijian Indians and how they were double colonized first in India. They came from a colony, the British colony, and then into Fiji again when Fiji was basically just had been colonized. So harm that was imparted, and the impacts of that colonization and that and the slavery has, I think the intergenerational harm continues in Aotearoa in New Zealand. the negative side of the Fijian Indian statistics is that they have some of the highest rates of suicide in Aotearoa,
Wow.
and also some of the highest rates of family violence. And that's a direct result of not just displacement, but also, the trauma of the Girmit.
Mm. Just coming back to our talanoa, or the topic of contribution, I understand that there were efforts here to get the government to recognise the Fiji Indian community as Pacific Islanders rather than Asian. What's the update on that?
So that's reached a bit of a stalemate with the previous government, the previous Labour Party government, or Labour-led government. So the Minister for Pacific People at the time, Pito C.O. Williams, refused to entertain that request. There was a human rights complaint made. Again, that didn't progress in the favor of the Fijian Indians. And currently, from our community centers, Fiji centers perspective, we're still pursuing that. We've also had a discussion with Statistics New Zealand about the numbers and trying to ascertain why they haven't managed to put a separate category so that, we can look at the number of Fijian Indians and also relative to Pacific Islanders. So, for example, I think in the 2018 census, I think Fijian Indians were roughly, I think it was 13,000. Yet, there was another statistic saying Hindus in the Pacific, and there were 60,000. So, you can see that most probably all of them, Hindus born in the Pacific living in Aotearoa were 60,000. And you should most probably assume that most of them were Fijian Indian.
Mm.
So that conversation is continuing. Hopefully, the aspirations for the Fijian Indians to become recognized as Pacific Islanders, not as indigenous Pacific Islanders, but as Indians from the Pacific.
A human rights researcher says the escalation of violence in West Papua is on par with some of the most intense times of conflict over the past 6 decades. It comes as the United Liberation Movement for West Papua claims Indonesia killed at least one civilian while severely injuring another last Tuesday in Phuket Regency. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
Benny Wende, interim president of the United Liberation Movement for West Papua, says an 18-year-old was killed by a rocket from a helicopter, while another civilian sustained severe injuries to both of his legs. Mr. Wende says the injured civilian has refused to go to hospital, fearing he will be killed if he does. Andreas Osono with Human Rights Watch says the escalation of violence in West Papua is in line with the most violent periods in the past 60 years.
Over the last 1 month, I think, 3 weeks at least, I received unusually high WhatsApp messages with gruesome photos, either Indonesian soldiers being shot or Papuan, militant or civilian, being killed.
Food self-sufficiency has become a key priority under President Prabowo Subianto's administration. The president wants Indonesia to feed its population without imports in 4 to 5 years' time, with the greater goal of becoming a global food barn. To get there, Indonesia plans to convert millions of acres into farmland.
He wants Merauke in West Papua to be the so-called national food barn. This deforestation, land grabbing is much more deeper in Merauke than in the past.
Mr. Hasono says it could be escalating tensions.
Indigenous Papuans are also gaining more and more men, unfortunately also children, boys, to join the fight in the jungle.
Wenzi Fatubun from Merauke, who is now a PhD student with the University of Canterbury, says forests where he grew up are being cleared for the food security project.
Indonesian government took the land for the security project. It was not consulted and consent by the indigenous Papuans in that area.
Catherine Delahunty, spokesperson for West Papua Action Aotearoa, says the region is the lungs of the Pacific, which is now being destroyed.
They are stripping those lands and stripping those communities who live there from their traditional foods such as the sago palm to turn the whole of Merauke into one vast sugar cane, rice and palm plantations. And the effects of this have been massive and they're just getting worse.
A spokesperson for Indonesia's embassy in Wellington says they cannot confirm if there was a military attack in Punjak Regency last week, but everything done by the military aligns with human rights. Part of the statement has been voiced.
Everything conducted by the Indonesian government and its military would always be according to national and international laws.
Mr. Wendare says West Papuans are a forgotten, voiceless people and wanted to know why the region was not receiving global attention, unlike Ukraine and Palestine. Ms. Delahunty says there's no excuse for New Zealanders to not be aware of what's going on.
These people are in our region, but they're not white people. I think there's a huge element of racism towards Papuans and towards Pacific nations who aren't perceived as important in the Western worldview.
She says New Zealand doesn't want to rock the boat with Indonesia as a regional powerhouse. That, coupled with a media blackout, makes it easy for Indonesia to act with impunity against the people of West Papua.
Pasifika union advocates say that hard times for the community are only going to get harder. Figures released last week show Aotearoa's unemployment rate has remained at 5.1%, but Pasifika unemployment has risen to 10.8% this quarter, more than double that of the national rate. Kaya Selby reports.
Yeah, it is pretty hopeless, at the moment.
That is how Antonia Lili'i, a Pasifika organiser for First Union in Auckland, describes the mood amongst her Pasifika members. Tamaki Makaurau is home to more than 275,000 Pacific Island people as of 2023, but according to the latest unemployment figures, 12.1% of Pasifika in Auckland cannot find work, the highest level in 10 years.
We are constantly in survival mode, we've been in survival mode since COVID, but to have this announcement recently, just before Mother's Day, it's quite disheartening.
Nationwide, 1 in 10 Pasifika are unemployed. It's now at its highest level since 2016. Labour's Carmel Cipollone says that Pasifika are being hit the hardest because of job losses in Pasifika-dominant sectors.
We've seen the building and construction industry come to a halt, so there are fewer jobs there. We've got hiring freezes in the health sector, and so there are fewer jobs there. And Pacific people generally are working in more precarious work, and so when there are job losses, sadly, it is Pacific that suffer the most.
The government have expressed relief that the headline figure for unemployment saw little change from last quarter. Economist Craig Rennie says that ignores several underlying weaknesses in the labour market.
About half of all workers saw a pay rise less than inflation. We saw 3 million fewer hours being worked this year. So overall, the headline rate remained the same, but that disguised numbers inside which are really quite concerning, like Māori and Pasifika unemployment, which are rising much more quickly than general unemployment.
Rennie says that the higher rates of unemployment in those communities should trigger alarm bells for the government.
1 in every 10 workers of Māori or Pasifika origin aren't at work, are unemployed. And as a consequence, there should be some action from the government, but right now there's no plan to assist those workers into getting into work or getting new skills and training so they can find different work.
If there is no change, Antonia says that many of her members have no choice but to cross the ditch or move to the islands.
It's easier to live in the islands at the moment because you don't have a mortgage, you don't have rent to pay, food, you can plant the food back home. For young people who've just graduated from uni, young Pasifika women or male who have done quite well in studying actually, a majority of them have moved to Australia.
National did not respond for comment, while ACT declined.
An Auckland kava business has found itself at the heart of a cultural debate, with critics raising concerns about appropriation, authenticity and the future of kava as a Pacific tradition. Co-owners Charles Byram, a Kiwi-American of Samoan descent, and Derek Hillen say it helped them give up alcohol during COVID lockdowns. Coco Lance reports.
The controversy started when a social media influencer reposted a promotional video of the business. Speaking anonymously with RNZ Pacific, she questioned its ethical foundations.
Their website and Instagram portrayed trendy wellness-style branding, rather than a proud celebration of authentic Pacific customs or values. What's currently shown on their website and Instagram is a mix of Fijian kava practice served in a Samoan tānoa. That to me is confusing and dilutes cultural authenticity.
A Fijian academic and Waikato University lecturer, Apua Aporosa, says Pacific people have lost a great deal of traditional knowledge and culture due to Eurocentrism.
Non-European peoples have lost a great deal of their culture, traditional knowledge and ceremonial practice due to Eurocentrism, to modernity and worldviews that often view indigenous practices as naive and underdeveloped, spiritually gullible and what have you. In the case of kava, we then see commercial operations advertising traditional kava ceremonies. We see that online in advertising, that these operations are advertising these traditional kava ceremonies, selling the thing they tried to take from us and now using it as a commodity. Practices like traditional kava ceremonies are sacred to us.
A Tongan academic at Otago University, Edmund Fehoko, says the situation is layered.
It's one of the few practices we hold dearly to our heart, and that is somewhat indigenous to our Pacific people. Can't be found anywhere else. But it's an interesting and exciting space where all types of people and all genders come in and feel safe. This is moving away from the cultural, customary way of things. But we need to find new ways and create new opportunities to further disseminate knowledge.
At the heart of it are the co-founders of Vibes Kava. For one of them especially, Mr. Byram, the backlash has cut deep.
I feel like I was getting judged for the color of my skin and not understanding who I was or what I was trying to accomplish.
On the other hand, he acknowledges there are frustrations.
At the end of the day, we don't want to create ceremony or steal anything from the culture. We want to celebrate it. And the best way that we can do that is just kind of being ourselves, but acknowledging the comments and understanding and concern of other people. It's also why we got involved with the Pacific Business Hub to just, they represent so many different businesses from so many different islands. It's just an understanding more of how can we do this in a way where we acknowledge people, but also celebrate ourselves and wanting to create something ourselves.
He says for him, the business is about fostering his culture and connecting people.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.